big night for the Sixers last night. They dominate the Raptors and take a 2-1 series lead. Right now, Kurt Helin, NBC Sports, going to join us to talk a little bit more about what happened last night and take a little look ahead. And you can listen to Kurt Helin on NBC Sports Radio at NBCSportsRadio.com. Download the NBC Sports Scores mobile app today. And Kurt, what a night last night for the Sixers. They win the game in Toronto. First time they had done that in 12 years, but they probably followed it up with maybe their most impressive performance of the playoffs last night.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a game where just kind of everything came together. Obviously, the emotions were high, and it was very loud inside the building. But sometimes teams ride that at the start and then kind of lose it, and Toronto kind of kept hanging around. But this time they really pulled it out. They really blew them out, and it was, a credit to a lot of things. Obviously, Joel Embiid had a big game, but I think more importantly, their defense has just absolutely stymied the Toronto offense so far, outside of Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi gets what he wants, kind of gets where he wants to go, but every other Raptor looked like, frankly, like the Raptors from the last few playoffs. They look confused. They're making an extra pass, but the rotations are really sharp, and it's a long, athletic team, and they're just playing great defense. And the other thing that's really came together in this game and kind of has for much of the series, Toronto was supposed to have this huge bench advantage, and they just don't.
Right.
James Ennis has been. I should pimp my school here. Long Beach State's own James Ennis, as well as Mike
Greg Monroe.
That bench has been just. Greg Monroe unless he tries to dunk, has looked great. Everything they've done has just worked for them better than Toronto right now. And the Raptors, I expect a sense of desperation out of them in Game 4 because they know if they lose this one, they're really done. But they might well be.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, yes, if the Raptors bring it all, and I'm not suggesting that they can't win another game, but what if Joel Embiid gives you that Joel Embiid?
That's huge, though, right? That was the other thing that they had going for them. They went out and got Marc Gasol in large part for this matchup. For this was the one that they needed him back for, right? And Embiid last night completely dominated that matchup, and they haven't. Toronto hasn't done a great job of completely matching those two up, but it didn't matter last night. And Embiid was hitting threes, he was pump faking threes, he was doing it all. And when he's playing at that level, everybody feeds off of him, and it opens things up for Butler. It opens things up for Harris. You have to help, even if Gasol's on there, you have to help on Embiid, and that just creates all sorts of opportunities. Plus, I thought they did a good job getting a few easy buckets in transition and everything else. It was just it was a really dominant performance, and I think it's what a lot of teams in the East and the league feared when they saw this starting five. They're like, man, they don't have a lot of depth, they don't have this. But if that group really comes together, they can be elite, and they looked like it last night.
Yeah, now, I know the Sixers made a bunch of adjustments in Game 2 defensively. They put Embiid on Siakam, they put Harris on Gasol. You didn't see that from the get-go last night. They kind of came out the way they did in Game 1, and were still able to kind of take the lead. I didn't see a lot of adjustments from the Raptors. What can they do maybe in Game 4?
They have to attack more. First off, by the way, I liked that decision to kind of go back to the original lineups by Brett Brown and the coaching staff, because if you guys watched the game, Toronto started to figure it out at the end. You could start to see the light come on, like, well, if this is how they're going to play us, we have to do this. They went back to the original lineups. Toronto's just got to attack, and I think Kawhi's been the only guy doing that. They are right now. They're, like you said, they're making the extra pass around the perimeter. The Brett Brown phrase would be they're giving up good for great, which is not a bad thing unless that team is really sharp on their rotations, and then great isn't next. And so they're just passing up good shots to not better shots, and it's just not working for them. They've got to just attack the rim and try to get there and use some of the, look, Siakam's got length. They've got some guys who can play. Kyle Lowry just flat out has to be better. And if they do that, they can make it a game. But if Philly's playing like this, it just might not matter. If Philadelphia's on such a high and they're feeling it now, that's really got to worry Toronto. And the Raptors fans are already in a very dark place because they feel like they've seen this movie before.
Yes, they have had, this is interesting. If they were to get knocked out in this round, after the trade and everything, and they don't even advance past the second round, you wonder what happens to that franchise. A team that has been in the playoffs, 6 straight years, they went for it this year. If they lose in this round, you wonder what's next for them.
Well, look, I think one of the biggest Sixers fans right now in the universe is Steve Ballmer. Somewhere he was doing that really awkward dance thing he does in his chair. Kawhi looked really frustrated after that game, and so who knows what he's thinking? The guy's kind of a mime. We'll see what he decides. He might have really loved his experience in Toronto, but I think that's one of the fascinating parts of the whole East playoffs, right, is what happens to Boston and Kyrie Irving, and frankly with Philadelphia, with Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris, both of whom will have, not only are free agents, but will have plenty of options this summer. If they were frustrated by the experience versus having a good playoff run, how does that change things? So that's just part of the fun of the East. There's really high stakes for every team.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And the atmosphere in Philly last night, and the way they played. Jimmy Butler said after the game, Kurt, that chemistry, it's overrated, that we're just guys go out there. If there's a shot, take it. If there's not, pass it. You're starting to see a team, though, kind of click right before your eyes here as we get into the second round. It seems like, hey, look, this team knows what they're doing together.
Yeah, I don't know that chemistry is overrated at this level, because once you get to the best 8 teams in the league, chemistry does start to separate. I think you see it a little bit with Houston and Golden State right now, where the chemistry really kind of does matter. That said, I've always been a fan of Daryl Morey's phrase, chemistry is a 3-game win streak. Philadelphia is starting to put it together, starting to feel it, and that builds chemistry, and it just, in the playoffs in particular, as long as you can stay on that high, they can keep rolling. It's more importantly, they handled that first loss well and bounced back, which is the bigger thing.
Well,
they didn't start finger pointing and making blowing up.
Kurt Helin's with us. NBC Sports covers the NBA, and you mentioned they after game 1, we got to go to Brett Brown and the adjustments. I mean, here's a guy, if you lived here, you would think this guy was a clown coach and he should be coaching middle school basketball with the way some people kind of criticize him after games. But I guess for those people, they're kind of taking one on the chin right now with the role that he's had in this series.
I have spent time doing stuff with CSN, not CSN, I'm sorry, NBC Sports Philadelphia now. I've got to get that right.
Yes.
NBC Sports Philadelphia out there. And I've answered that question. It kind of surprised me because that wasn't the sense around the league. But I know in Philadelphia he's not popular. They didn't like the adjustments and a lot of other things. But he's been through a couple of playoff wars before in San Antonio, and he showed this series that he knows how to make those, how to push those buttons and how to get those guys going in the right direction.
All right, we know that the Sixers lead 2-1. We've got Boston and Milwaukee tonight, tied up 1-1. Boston won big. Bucks answered. Which read do you have on that series coming back to Boston?
I think tonight we learn a lot, right? Just because we've seen the blowout each way, and the series really hasn't found its level. It hasn't had a close game. It hasn't had, how they are going to handle things down the stretch versus, how you handle Al Horford. You'll let Al Horford take a bunch of threes versus some other stuff early in the game, but do you close out on him late in the game because the guy can knock it down? We just haven't seen answers to a lot of these things. Kyrie Irving should be better at home. I like Boston's chances there. I've liked them in this series, but we're going to learn a lot about just how good the Bucks are, how good the Bucks are and how they're going to handle pressure, because much like Philadelphia, Boston's going to be loud, and there's a distinct home court advantage with those Celtics fans.
All right, and then, of course, Warriors-Rockets. Let me just get a quick one from you on this. Last year we got the 7-gamer. Is this all Warriors? You think the Rockets can get 2 at home here?
I don't think they can get 2 at home, but I think Game 3 is going to be interesting. Obviously you're going to get full-on desperation. We can't lose this game, home court Rockets. But you know what we haven't seen yet? That one Golden State game where they're just dominant, where Steph Curry and Klay Thompson go off and there's nothing anybody can do. They've got one of those a series, and I just got a weird feeling we're going to see it Saturday night.
Kurt Helin, NBC Sports Radio. Listen at NBCSportsRadio.com. Download the NBC Sports Scores mobile app today. We have Sixers and Raptors Sunday, 3:30 on 97.3 ESPN. We have Celtics and Bucks tonight starting at 8. Kurt, appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you again soon.
I look forward to it.
All right, Kurt Helin, like all guests of the Sports Bash, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.